Nightcrawler almost didn't happen the way we know it today. From its unexpected origins in a photo book to director Dan Gilroy's initial struggles with the script, the film could have turned out very different. But thanks to key decisions on casting, location, and story, it became one of the most gripping and intense films in recent years. Let's dive into how Nightcrawler evolved from a simple idea into the dark, thrilling masterpiece we see today. Dan Gilroy came up with the idea for Nightcrawler all the way back in 1988. He was inspired after running across a photo book called Naked City, which showcased pictures taken by a Ukrainian photojournalist named Ouija. These photos captured the nightlife of the 1940s New York, often highlighting crime, death, and sensational moments. Ouija would actually sell these shots to tabloid newspapers. This combination of crime, art, and business fascinated Gilroy, and he initially wanted to create a film with a similar feel to Chinatown directed by Roman Polanski in 1974. But things didn't go as planned. A movie called The Public Eye, loosely based on Ouija's life, was released in 1992. That made Gilroy pause on his idea. And a couple of years later, when he moved to Los Angeles in the mid-90s, he noticed how local news stations seemed to be obsessed with violent crime stories. The more graphic they were, the better. And this led him to think about how much news ratings spike when something intense, like a police chase, is aired. Around that time, he learned about the stringer profession, people who seek out and capture these violent events and sell the footage to news stations. And this got him thinking, could stringers be the modern-day version of Ouija? Gilroy wasn't aware of any movie focusing on the experiences of stringers, so he started writing a script, but figuring out the plot wasn't easy, and for a long time, he played around with the idea of using conspiracies or murder mysteries at the core of the story. At one point, he even considered giving it a typical hero-driven narrative. But none of these ideas clicked, and after a lot of trial and error, he shifted his ideas. Instead of trying to force a plot, he simply focused on creating interesting characters. Initially, Gilroy thought about making the lead a traditional hero, but he found that too dull after some consideration, so he went in the opposite direction and crafted an anti-hero, which was much more compelling for him. Anti-heroes are rare in films because they're hard to write without turning them into outright psychopaths. Gilroy wanted to do something different. He wanted an anti-hero who could still be seen as successful, even if in a twisted way. He drew inspiration from films like The King of Comedy, To Die For, and The Talented Mr. Ripley to get a sense of how anti-heroes work in cinema. For Lou Bloom's character, Gilroy deeply tapped into themes of unemployment and capitalism. He wanted to show someone who thrives on the principles of capitalism, but also loses their way because of it. But Lou also doesn't change throughout the film, a rare occurrence for the main character of any story. Gilroy made his choice on purpose. He believed that most people don't really change their core beliefs once they've developed them. So the film starts when Lou attacks a security guard. It's clear that he's always been a criminal. His eventual job as a stringer doesn't make him lose his morality. He never had any to begin with. And interestingly, Lou's backstory is never revealed in the film. Gilroy intentionally left it out so that viewers would create their own ideas about who Lou is. And looking at all of these choices, it's easy to see how Nightcrawler could have changed courses several times during its production. If Gilroy had stuck with his original idea of a conspiracy or murder mystery plot, or if he had followed through with a traditional hero-driven narrative, the film would have had an entirely different tone and feel. But how did this film go from almost impossible to make to becoming a hit? Well, once the script for Nightcrawler was done being written, Dan Gilroy knew he wanted to direct it himself, and he sent it to his brother Tony Gilroy for advice on how to take on such a big task. Tony was immediately hooked, calling the script absolutely compelling, and what stood out even more was how every person who read it wanted to be involved. In the film industry, that kind of gripping excitement from a project is pretty rare. For production, Dan pulled together an amazing team. His brother, John Gilroy, worked as the film editor. Robert Elswit, a cinematographer Dan had met while working on The Bourne Legacy in 2012, handled the visuals. The two had already built a strong connection and spent months creating a shot list before filming even started. The music was composed by James Newton Howard, another major name, but one tricky part of the production was getting the right footage for the newsroom scenes. Dan needed real background footage, so he reached out to the Rayshbrook brothers, who were actual stringers in Los Angeles dating all the way back to the mid-90s. Not only did they offer their footage, but they also came on board as technical advisors to make sure the film accurately portrayed what it's like to be a stringer. All of these elements, Dan's decision to direct, the strong production team, and the eye-opening real-life stringer involvement, helped shape Nightcrawler into the film we know today. But what if Jake Gyllenhaal wasn't Lou Bloom in the final casting decision? Well, Jake Gyllenhaal was always Dan Gilroy's top pick for the role of Lou in Nightcrawler. At first, Gyllenhaal was set to star in another movie at the time, but when that fell through, it gave him time to meet with Gilroy. The two met up in Atlanta where Gyllenhaal was filming Prisoners, coincidentally also a dark and brooding thriller in 2013. After Gilroy explained that he actually saw Nightcrawler as a success story, Gyllenhaal was immediately interested. He loved how the character was written and was blown away by the dialogue and the style of the script. From that moment on, Gyllenhaal was all in. They spent months rehearsing before filming began, and Gyllenhaal even got involved behind the scenes, having to pick the crew and watching audition tapes. To get into Lou's character, Gilroy told Gyllenhaal to think of Lou as a coyote, always hunting, always hungry. Gyllenhaal took this seriously, going as far as losing almost 30 pounds to capture that lean, relentless energy. His intense routine involved eating mostly kale salads, chewing gum, and running 15 miles a day. Some people on the crew thought this was too extreme, but Gilroy stood by Gyllenhaal's choices. Since Gyllenhaal had respected the script and not requested anything be changed, Gilroy felt it was only fair to support his dedication. And when it came to casting Rick, a young, desperate man who is struggling financially and is living on the streets, Riz Ahmed was one of 75 actors who auditioned. At first, Gilroy didn't think Ahmed fit the part, but he still let him audition. As soon as Ahmed started, Gilroy knew he was the right choice. To prepare for the role, Ahmed went out to Skid Row, talking to the homeless and learning about their struggles with abandonment, which helped him understand Rick's complicated relationship with Lou. As for Nina, Gilroy had written the role with his wife, Renee Russo, in mind. He didn't want Nina to come across as just a tough corporate figure. He wanted her to have vulnerability. Russo wasn't aware that Gilroy wrote the part for her to play, but she was drawn to the role, because she never played someone so desperate before. To nail the character, Russo had to dig into her own life experiences, remembering times where fear or desperation pushed her to cross moral boundaries. Unlike her co-stars, Russo didn't meet with journalists or news producers to prepare. She saw Nina as someone who could work in any industry, so she focused more on the character's drive rather than limiting her to a news background. But think about it. What if Gyllenhaal hadn't captured Lou's predatory, relentless energy? Or if Ahmed hadn't brought that raw, vulnerable side to Rick? Without Russo, Nina could have felt like just another tough corporate character. Each character brought something special to the movie that made it stand out. And without them, Nightcrawler might have missed the intense, even uncomfortable edge that makes it absolutely unforgettable. So how does one shoot a gripping thriller on a tight budget? Let's look at how smart planning and fast-paced filming brought Nightcrawler to life without cutting corners. Incredibly, Nightcrawler was filmed on a tight budget of only $8.5 million, with most of the funding coming from Bold Films, an American independent production and finance company. A chunk of the budget, $2.3 million, came from the California Film Tax Credit, which rewards directors for filming in California. According to Tony Gilroy, the budget was incredibly low and the film could have easily cost twice as much. To stretch the budget, cinematographer and Robert Elswit found ways to build efficiencies into the schedule, a move that all three Gilroy brothers agreed was key to finishing the film on time and within budget. Before filming even started, the crew spent 2 days scouting locations across Los Angeles. Some crew members didn't think there would be enough time to shoot everything, and they expected about 15 pages of the script would need to be cut. Gilroy, however, saw this as a personal challenge and was determined to make it all work. Filming kicked off on October 6, 2013, and the crew managed to wrap up everything in just 27 days. That's incredibly fast, especially considering they had to cover 80 different locations. They were moving so fast, they'd often hit several spots in one night. Director Dan Gilroy even joked they were always just minutes away from catching the sunrise while finishing scenes. For a little comparison, think about the film Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. That movie was shot in just 23 days, which is crazy fast too, given the polished final outcome. Now, considering the tight budget and fast-paced schedule, the film nearly ended up looking rushed or incomplete. But thanks to smart planning and determination, everything came together. Now, one of the big goals while filming Nightcrawler was to show Los Angeles in a way that felt wild and untamed, almost like the city had a life of its own. Gilroy didn't want the visuals to just match the dark tone of the story. He wanted to dig deeper and show LA as a place where survival is a constant struggle. Instead of the usual washed-out, man-made look at LA often gets in movies, Gilroy saw it as a raw landscape of survival, full of primal energy. Gyllenhaal's animalistic approach to Lou really influenced this idea, and they decided to film Nightcrawler almost like a wildlife documentary, where Lou is the predator hunting in the urban jungle. And to make this vision come to life, cinematographer Robert Elswit used wide-angle lenses and deep focus, making the city feel expansive and alive. He stayed away from the soft focus, so everything looked sharp and real, almost like you could feel the tension in the air. And this gave LA a sense of danger and urgency, and making it feel like more than just a background. It was a part of the story itself. It would have completely changed the atmosphere if they hadn't shot the movie in Los Angeles, because LA's mix of glamour and grit reflects Lou's character perfectly. The dark, chaotic streets mirror Lou's own predatory nature. Filming somewhere else would have taken away the gritty, unforgiving feel that's so important to the movie. But that's just me. What do you think? If you enjoyed this breakdown of Nightcrawler and the decisions that shaped the version we see today, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite movies. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.